Good evening. This is such a special night. Are you as excited as I am? Yeah. I can tell. And to have this many people here during a holiday week speaks so highly of our guest tonight. So I don't want to waste a single moment. We have her in this building. So let me bring to the stage Laura Dern.
Wow, great to be here with all of you.
That's a nice warm welcome.
Thanksgiving week. Are you here for the conversation or that we are closed and recalendars and you're like, we can get pumpkin pie,
it closed.
Have a little talking.
No, Marie's closed. It's gone.
No, it is not.
Yes, I hate to break it to you, it's gone. Oh, man. It's like the saddest
I'm
thing.
leaving. God bless you guys.
Really,
I'm so happy to be here with you.
And honestly, I'm sure it didn't take much cajoling on your part to come out tonight for her. I mean, really, this person, I can't believe I'm here right now. This is such a dream, such a dream.
Aww.
So we'll talk a little bit about your early career, and then I'll go through some projects, of which there are so many. I've had to winnow down your incredible resume to some standouts. But I would love to talk a little bit about, obviously, everyone knows you come from an acting family. Diane Ladd and Bruce Dern are your parents. Yes.
I love that.
Incredible. Your father is so amazing in Once Upon a Time. I watched it for the third time this weekend, and I'm like, this guy he's a genius.
He's so amazing.
Really, and such a trip too, I imagine.
Yeah, he is.
He's stunning, and your mother as well. I would like to know, what were you like as a child? Did you come out of the womb an actor, a show personality, or were you studious? What was your demeanor like as a kid?
Neither of those things.
Okay.
I don't know. But I know that I was born as my parents were doing a Western in kind of Northern Valley in California. So I think by like age 6 days, I went on location for the first time. And my parents, they were staying in a motel room, and so they used one of the drawers of the chest of drawers as my crib.
Oh my God.
So I was definitely born into an acting family, a working acting family.
Wow.
And I think I was shy and luckily raised by a mother and maternal grandmother who cared deeply about their community, their friends, their neighbors.
Did your mom try to shield this from you as long as possible and try to give you, normalcy as a kid, or did she welcome you wanting to be part of it?
You know, here's the thing, it's so wild, like how everything's changed. Because for those of us who were in Los Angeles when I was growing up in the 70s with actor parents in the 80s, like there were 2 movie magazines.
Right.
You barely did press. There was one talk show, Johnny Carson and Merv Griffin in the, early evening, but as late night television. So even when my parents did press, it was not something
it wasn't all consuming.
You knew about, nobody really talked about it, and actors were workers. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say there weren't moments that were glamorous, but I feel like I grew up in a very kind of simple upbringing. The people were extraordinary characters, but the environment was not flashy at all.
Patricia Arquette's talked about that too. She obviously comes from this huge acting family, but she says that they created this kind of simple environment for her and her siblings.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
And you see that in her and you today, this sense of groundedness that I think is not always the case when you grow up in this environment.
Well, and I think, I think that's part of it. I mean, we all assume that our families are the characterful family, and then you meet other people who've come from various walks of life, and all of us have wild and insane people in our family.
Probably everyone in this room, we can all agree.
Yeah, so we all come from, deeply interesting people, which is probably why we became actors. But I do think I was really lucky that my parents goal to learn about the craft and care deeply about collaboration and study and continue to study their whole lives as members of the actor studio. And I mean, they just love being actors. And that was a great way to grow up. And I think I was a shy person and not in an environment where I had to be on as a kid, but I think it was more my mother and grandmother's deep empathy and activism that made me an outgoing person, not being an actor per se.
Wow. And what were your favorite subjects in school? Did you like school?
All things revolution.
That sounds about
literary
right.
revolutions, historical revolutions.
Were there mathematical revolutions?
If there are, I didn't learn about them. And if I had, I don't think it was my skill set. But I loved storytelling, so I loved, history and great writers. That was my big passion, I would say. But my mom was a big activist, and here at SAG, on the board forever, and fighting for everybody's rights and protections. And so I think I did grow up with a drive to, long for empathy or find connection with others. And it was, I think, from that place that acting became so
almost like ancillary with the activism.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's sort of her energy.
Right. And what was your first stage performance? Whether in school, community theater, or the performance that meant something to you?
As a good Catholic girl should, it was playing the Blessed Mother in my first grade Christmas play in Beverly Hills, California.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I was very proud. I held the
How
baby
much prep
Jesus.
Work did you have to do?
He wasn't as characterful because he was my doll, but I pretended that he was.
Oh. So was the nativity, like acting out the birth and everything?
Oh, yes.
Okay. That's a lofty character to start with.
Yes, that was definitely my first role. I guess it was like 6 or something.
Oh my gosh. And do you remember the feeling of being on stage and thinking, these people are looking at me, I like this, or did it take a while to grow into that?
Yeah, I didn't. I was an extra in a couple of movies for my parents, and when I was 7, I was an extra on my mom's film, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
I saw that, yeah. I think it was Girl with an Ice Cream Cone as your title.
Yeah, and that was, I think, the first time that I became so interested.
How old were you when you did that?
7.
Oh my gosh.
Or
Wow.
6 or 7, yeah.
Wow.
So that was the first time I think I was really interested. And I think what interested me was, 2 things. One was watching Scorsese work with these 2 actresses and seeing how they were inventing and collaborating and trying stuff from take to take and improvising and
Wow.
and how everyone was a team, as I've talked about before, like how amazing that we get to do a job unlike writers or painters or sculptors where 150 or so people come together to make one piece of art.
Right.
Like that's an amazing gift and so delicious. And so I think I saw that at work and felt really excited and moved by that.
And what a first entree to watching
Yes.
Scorsese direct your mom and Ellen Burstyn.
It was amazing. But also, and I think the other thing was I also was watching the scene I was in, like right in front of me, Ellen and Chris Christopherson finally kiss, and I totally fell in love with him. And so I think I was like, I want to be an actress where I get kissed by Chris Christopherson.
Oh, a high bar very early on was set for you. It's amazing looking through your resume, and I was proud to say that I have seen every single thing that you've done except Foxes.
Oh, well, you
which I can't find it anywhere. I've been looking because we don't have video stores anymore. But for those of you who don't know, 1980, Adrienne Lyne, she played a character named Debbie alongside Jodie Foster, Scott Baio. So many questions about this movie. I wish we had an hour just to talk about Foxes. But what do you remember about that? Was like your first role on your own. You were 13, I think, around
11.
11. Oh my God.
First professional job. Yeah.
And did you have to audition for that?
Oh yeah.
You did. Okay.
and I am terrified by auditioning. I find it so
Still?
scary. Yeah, I
mean, the fact that you'd even have to audition at all anymore is amazing.
I never, like, I meet actors like, I love to audition. It's such an opportunity. I'm like, are you insane? I'm terrified. I never liked it. And I think for me, part of it is just you don't know it yet. It can't be honest. It's an audition. So it's such a complicated thing.
And they also don't know what they want too, a lot of times. They're developing the material at that point. They're sort of like experimenting, and you're part of the experiment.
And how do you perform a thing? Like, I don't even understand it. I'm so impressed by any actor who can show up and try to make something so authentic that feels so inauthentic in this
and interestingly, we
awkward
did a
office.
Little Women event a few weeks ago, and Florence, your co-star, said that what she did with the character on tape for Amy in Little Women is what ended up being very close to what Greta wanted.
Yeah,
and that alchemy
amazing.
of what an actor can bring to the audition, and then for it to survive that process, and then end up on screen, I have a feeling it's probably very rare.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and she is amazing.
But she is. But I just I loved, what was I saying? Something?
Oh, Foxes. I was just curious.
Foxes. So I did audition, and I auditioned for a part that I was much too young for, and then luckily got to do a very small part in it, and it was amazing.
What do you remember about working with Jodie, who obviously was a huge star?
I had a screen test with, and it was like a formal screen test, which was terrifying. And it was for the part of her friend who was 18, and she was turning 18, I believe, or 17 on the movie. Right. And I was 11, but lied and said I was 14, but then I could look older.
That's why I couldn't figure out how old you were supposed to be. The timeline wasn't aligning up.
So they, were very generous to me as I was like,
You were tall too, which helped. You looked older.
Oh yeah, I was my height at 11, so that was part of it. Like auditioning for older parts, not a popular thing in middle school, but works as an actor. But it was amazing, and she was fantastic. She was studying, and I think basically fluent in French at that point. So she had her French tutor, and she and the tutor were teaching me dirty words in French, which was very exciting.
What a role model, too.
And I was with Scott Baio, which was fantastic.
There wasn't anyone bigger than Chachi at the time. So my first memory of you as a kid was in Mask. And which is still, and I remember being afraid of that movie as a kid, just the visuals of Eric's character. And I've grown to love it so much over the years, and I rewatched it again. And the earnestness and innocence that you have in this role, that is such a beautiful story. I feel like we need to just see this movie over and over again. It's the most beautiful story about acceptance. You got to work with Cher. Incredible. What was that? It was Peter Bogdanovich who directed. What kind of direction did you learn from him about, first of all, you're playing someone who's blind, and the physicality of your character, and then working with Eric, who had obviously all these prosthetics. What was the challenge of negotiating that on screen?
Well, first, let me say, by great good fortune, I sort of fell into a few opportunities at a very young age, which mimicked the thing I fell in love with when I saw Scorsese, which is this. It wasn't about acting per se, it was the collaboration between a filmmaker, an auteur, and actors, and what that was like. And so to work so early on with Bogdanovich,
who was a peer of Scorsese's, came from that same time.
And was extraordinary to work with. And, as we were in the rehearsal process, screened so many films for us, and we learned about John Ford and Buñuel. I mean, we were really, Eric, myself, and some of the other young actors on it were really invited in to understand filmmaking, and that was so beautiful. I mean, it's what you dream of. And what I loved is he was also very trusting, but kind of handing it over to the actor, both for Eric to work with the actual family, Rusty, the boy, Rocky's real mother, who was with us on set, and really understand his physicality and work with the doctors and talk about what this amazing boy's life was like. And in my case, said, go to the Braille Institute, find someone to shadow, talk to them, learn what it's like, and was so supportive and persistent about making sure that I was doing my homework and job as an actor.
Wow.
So it was amazing.
That's incredible.
It was an incredible, early experience and such a beautiful movie.
So fascinating, and I think about this a lot. Were your peers at the time, I think of the Brat Pack peers, and how they were existing in this other world. And John Hughes movies, of course, meant so much to all of us, but this, not to say they weren't doing actors' work, but they were doing very specific type of sort of teen storytelling. And here you are working with Bogdanovich, at the same time. And not a lot of people, especially women, were getting these opportunities at this time.
Well,
people your age.
Let me be clear.
Right.
I auditioned for everything. Right. I mean, TV shows, commercials.
Wow.
I was auditioning,
Right.
and trying to find my way, and auditioned for Brat Pack movies. And actually, Mask was the first time I had to make a very difficult decision where I was offered the role of the girlfriend in a Brat Pack movie, and
Which
it was
movie
going to be, I won't say, but it was going to be and was a very successful movie. Ooh, and it was a good salary. And then I was offered scale to do this small role in Mask.
Wow.
And it was because of my parents and Scorsese that I was like, no, I can't not have that opportunity with this director.
So it was like taste before the
or just not even, I didn't even consider it taste, or I think it was just what I knew. Wow. But what's crazy is I didn't get the John Hughes movie, and many times I was cast by Bogdanovich, and then I was cast by David Lynch. I auditioned for a Brat Pack movie, like the same week I auditioned for Blue Velvet, and I got Blue Velvet. So and it is the course of my career and the people I've loved working with. And that's the other amazing thing, is sort of trusting process, opportunity, instincts.
Did you feel like you had, and this word is so blanket, but confidence at that point? Did you feel assured when you walked into a room that you knew what you were doing, you felt comfortable in your skin, or were you still growing into?
Oh, growing into. And also those movies that I got to make with such privilege with those amazing filmmakers are now considered classics. Right. But when we made them, it was like, that's insane, that's so weird, that's so, left indie actor, blah, 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 and you do them for no money. And over here were my peers, very successful, very beloved mainstream commercial movies. So it's interesting how it takes, many years of a body of work to sort of make it a kind of career,
right.
Like a particular choice or something.
Right. Did you ever have conversations with those actors who were in the Brat Pack, who, by the way, are all excellent actors? Truly excellent actors. And I'm sure they were jealous of the work you were doing. There's no way that they didn't pine for, oh, wow, I wish I could, dip my toe in this art house experience and then also pay the bills with these other movies. So I wonder what they were wondering at the time about who their peers were and the work they were doing.
I think we're so young and vulnerable and insecure, like you guys know. We probably were all feeling it about each other. Right. And if, as I try to hone in on this greatest piece of advice I was ever given by my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. White, which is keep your eyes on your own paper.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the essential piece of advice. Yeah. It sort of takes till now to really harness a bit of that. But I think, 11 to 20, you're figuring yourself out. I mean, I think of my kids now at the age that they're figuring out, are they going to art school or college, or what are they going to do after high school? And I was already, living alone, having a career, and making these choices on my own, which was crazy.
Probably hard for you to imagine that now, seeing your 14 and 17-year-old.
My parents are crazy.
You turned out so well.
And I was like, you're so overprotected, let me be. And now I'm like, you're crazy, you should have kept me locked in your coven for years longer.
I'm sure they tried.
Yeah, no, they did.
So obviously you bring up David Lynch, your most prolific collaborator and most, I'll say, splashy.
Yeah.
So for Sandy Williams and Blue Velvet, had he seen you in something and wanted to meet you? What was your initial contact?
No, and I just got an email today from Pam Guest, which some of you may know Pam.
I don't know her.
She's amazing, casting director and actor, and Nick Guest, her husband. And she just sent an email saying, I can't believe it, I just found an old notebook, and in it I had the audition times of Blue Velvet casting sessions.
Wow.
And so she sent me a screenshot of the time and date of my audition and a star by my name of he liked me or whatever. But he'd never seen me in anything, and
it was cast here in LA?
Cast here in LA,
wow.
yeah. And just thought I was, right for it somehow. And and we just talked for an hour, and I think people around him had seen me in work, and the casting directors had.
Wow. And what struck you about him? Because he is such, what's so interesting is his movie appears so dark, and he has this sort of dark sensibility, but he really does seem also very grounded. He's, he meditates. He's this very sort of congenial guy. So it's odd when I don't know him personally, but what I've gleaned about him versus the work he's made, I feel like there's this kind of sweet guy in there, and I'm wondering what was it that made you connect with him?
Well, I think the same thing would be true of the two films I'd seen, and they perfectly paralleled my experience of The Man, which is I saw Eraserhead, and my mind was blown, and I was terrified, and I thought he was like the bravest filmmaker there. And I saw Elephant Man, and it was the most empathic, gorgeous, brilliantly made and acted piece
Similar
of
to
work
Mask in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right.
And same with David. You meet this, kind, gentle, affable meditator, and he's telling you the story of Blue Velvet. And you're 17 going, what is happening? Like, this is the nicest man telling me the scariest story. So, it felt incredible, but for me at that moment, having just seen Elephant Man, I was,
sold.
It was the dream of my life to work with that person.
Wow. And what do you remember about shooting that movie? Did you have a sense of what you were creating, or did you only realize this thing that is I'm still processing this movie 30 some years later. When you see it, you got a phone situation? Okay.
It's nice music.
I know it is. It's very lulling, actually. That's okay. Did you have a sense of this? Were you just along for the ride, or did you feel like, okay, this is on the page. I've absorbed what I'm doing. Kyle and I have a sense of our marching orders. Like, how was it working each day on the movie?
I mean, like working with him anytime. It's your job is to make an otherwise boundaryless and perhaps insane world feel as authentic and true as possible. And from that place, it's terrifying, it's radical, it's otherworldly, and it's Pollyanna. And it's hilarious. I mean, there are moments in Blue Velvet, there's some of the funniest things I've ever seen. And so, I love that you never have your footing with David Lynch, It keeps you wondering at every moment what it is to be human, who to trust, what to believe in. And ultimately, I think that there is light, even buried in the darkness, always waiting for you. And that's like such a thematic aspect of his work, and in a way of the characters he's allowed me to play, which is incredible. I mean, what other director could we say would cast actors, work with them for 20, 30 years, amass a tribe every time he works with someone. He's given you 2 lines, and then he gives you a lead, and then he lets you play another smaller part, and then it's an ensemble, and then, oh, I know, play 2 people in my movie. No, actually play 4 characters in my movie. No, be the only character in the movie. And it's Kyle MacLachlan, myself, and several others that have had the opportunity to play multiple characters and never stereotype his own actor. And I've worked with directors, and I've been privileged to work with them more than once. But it's not that they've said, okay, this time you're this kind of person. Now the next time you're going to be something so radically different. Right. You can feel them not typecast you, but see you in a certain way.
Which is hard not to, I think.
Of course. Right. And feel like maybe they've defined you as that thing. So they want to sort of stick with
Well, especially too, for you, having been so young, there's maybe a sense, especially an older male director, to feel like, you know, I've cultivated your talent, I gave you this opportunity, and not using it against you later on, but sort of thinking, maybe using that as sort of equity with you moving forward, as opposed to letting you reinvent each time, which I think is very magnanimous of any artist to allow his or her actors to do that.
Incredible.
And what would you say you took away from Blue Velvet moving forward that then you applied to your other projects with him, Wild at Heart, Inland Empire, the Twin Peaks reboot? Did it feel new each time, or did it feel like jumping back into the circus and you're like, oh, I know my routine?
Yeah, no, both. Never a routine, always home. Okay. Always safe, always boundaryless, no rules, no judgment. You can try everything. And it is amazing, you know, Adam Driver, who's in Marriage Story, such a brilliant, unbelievably brilliant actor, and his performance in Marriage Story, if you guys haven't seen it, is so beautiful.
Beyond, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, everybody. I love everyone in that movie, but
it's a real tour de force for him. We haven't seen him do this before.
Yeah.
Right.
And he speaks about, this is his 4th movie with Noah Baumbach, and he speaks about it, and I thought, put it so beautifully what I feel with David, which is, you know, it's amazing when you get to feel like you're picking up where you left off. And there's never an audition process on set where you're spending the first days wondering if the director's happy, or if it's the character they imagined, or if you're in the right direction. But it's just, you're home, this is a family. Now we're continuing this continual conversation about what it is to be human and flawed and all of it in this narrative. And that's the way it feels with David. You're just off again on a new journey. And
does he let you improv a lot when you're shooting?
I have, but he's also incredibly specific. Yes. Both things are true. I mean, Blue Velvet is word for word from the script.
Wow.
Wild at Heart, I think, is the same. Inland Empire, it's mostly written, but it was written in the moment, and we were making it in the moment.
Really? Wow.
I mean, in the moment.
That movie is, wow.
It's incredible.
It's really
that experience changed everything for me.
Really?
We made it over 3 years.
Oh, I didn't
I
realize
played 4, maybe 5 different characters. I was nursing my son when we started, and I was nursing my daughter, who was, went through my whole pregnancy, her birth, and then nursing her when we finished the movie in Łódź, Poland. Wow. And it was just wild, you know, and he delivered a 17-page monologue on a yellow legal pad at my door, and it was a Monday, and he was like, "We're shooting this Thursday." And I was like, wait, well, what do you mean shooting? He's like, memorize it. I was like, David, it's 17 pages. He's like, you'll get it. We're going to try to do it in one take. And we did. We did a 70-minute take, which I think they're like releasing on some
I need to see this.
Criterion or something. But the movie sort of started as this 70-minute monologue of this woman talking to this guy about her life, and then he got into it and started cutting pieces, and we kept building it. But some of that movie is, there are scenes that are me and David with a Sony camcorder, using the sound on the camcorder, him like throwing my makeup on, me putting my lips on. I was like going down the street to like shop for the dress that I'm gonna wear in the scene, and it's just the 2 of us. Shooting scenes, you know, all over the place. And it's like amazing, amazing.
Wow.
Such a gift.
Again, we could spend all of tonight just on the David Lynch project. So
yeah.
we must move forward.
Yes.
So thank you, David, for giving us so much to talk about. So Rambling Rose, another one of my favorites of yours, your first Oscar nomination and Golden Globe nomination. Have you guys seen this movie? Beautiful, yeah. 1991. And was this your first time working with a female director, Martha Coolidge?
Second time. I did a film called Smooth Talk when I was 15, 16 with Joyce Chopra, a great documentarian, and it was her first feature. A great movie. If people haven't seen Smooth Talk, I love that movie. Based on a Joyce Carol Oates story. And then Martha was the second.
What do you remember about that dynamic being directed by Martha? And she had done Valley Girl at this point. She had done, and this was quite a departure from Valley Girl, obviously, but she was really a big name at the time when so few women were for directing features.
Powerhouse, brilliant, like Joyce, so prepared, amazing, really compassionate toward a complicated character. Both films dealt a lot with a girl's sexuality, coming of age in a way, or misguidedness. So for me as a young girl and woman, it was particularly wonderful to have a woman to talk to through the complication of these scenes, very protective about them. And I didn't understand the absurdity of lack of gender parity in the industry. I hadn't really seen it.
Right.
I didn't understand. I was blind to the fact that how glaring it was that there were no women around anywhere. My makeup and hair was done by men. It was all male crews on almost every movie I did. I think the script supervisor was the only female or an assistant to a director that was there to talk to, maybe one other actress. But it was very, we won't even get into the lack of diversity, but it's, it was absurd. Right. So I didn't notice how lucky I was to have those opportunities, because I had done so few parts. I didn't know, half the movies weren't being made by women.
Of course. You just wanted to work.
Yeah, and she was amazing. And one day, I would say the end of the first week, and my mother, who's so brilliant in Rambling Rose and such a gorgeous performance. She plays actually my boss in a way, because I'm the nanny.
That's right.
So
it's been a while.
Lucas Haas's mom, Robert Duvall, and she are married and have this family, and I come to work for them. And she and I were talking over a scene with Martha, and it was wonderful. And Martha just had a baby, and she had a blanket wrapped around her, and she was nursing her son, and we were talking, the side of the set about this next scene we were going to do. And a male producer, but she's the filmmaker, came up to her and said, and I heard it, let's be clear, you need to never nurse your child anywhere in public again, because your crew is going to see this as a sign of weakness.
Oh my God.
And I remember being, 20 and thinking, wow, a sign of weakness to feed your child, first of all, and to the idea that a crew wouldn't honor that, or, which by the way is a glaring disrespect to the crew, and limited thinking, because they were incredibly inspired by her. But that was when I thought, oh, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. I guess this isn't just a thing you get to do. And let's see how many years it took before I did work with a woman again after that. But I realized that, there was a stigma, and Martha was amazing because I didn't feel it in any other way at that moment.
It's amazing to think too, and I've talked to Catherine Hardwicke about this when she was shooting Twilight. She cried one day because she was so stressed, and she had to go behind a tree and make sure no one saw her because she was so afraid of getting fired, that someone might see her. I mean, I've cried at work many times. I don't know about you guys. It's a thing that people do. And just hearing that she went through that, and she was so capable, and that movie became so giant, and she never directed any more of the Twilights. You think about these stories and how just the slightest thing can set someone back, for their future jobs, which we'll talk more about that later. So moving on to something very different, Jurassic Park. 1993. A little startup movie about some dinosaurs. So this was obviously your biggest commercial movie at that point. Did you have to fight the idea that you were a quote-unquote art house actor? Did you have to show, I can do blockbusters too, and if you did, who did you have to convince? Or did Steven say, no, I want Laura Dern? How did that work?
Well, a few things. One, he offered me the movie, which was an incredible
That's huge.
opportunity. Two, I did see it as an experimental art house movie in a way, because Steven Spielberg was making the first CGI movie.
Right.
And nobody knew what it was, if it would work.
Right.
It was a very pioneered thing. It was like, do you want to go on this journey and we're going to kind of paint things in the screen on a computer. The computer is like this big and they're like carrying it because there were no laptops to the set. And there was this giant camera called a VistaVision where they'd have plates and we'd stare at an X on a thing. Nobody'd done it. I mean, which is amazing. So we really did feel like we were in, it felt equal to a David Lynch movie where it was radical and nobody had ever done it before, and there was puppetry with Stan Winston and these guys from a place called ILM, but we'd never heard of them. You know what I mean? So it was wild, and it was a leap of faith, and for me, again, it was the opportunity to work with a favorite filmmaker. And I mean, to this day, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is top 5 movies ever for me, and Jaws is on that list too.
Of course.
Not that I don't love all the other movies, but
There's
those
too many.
were my,
so many.
My heart and soul. I love those movies.
Did you find after Jurassic Park became such a huge hit that your career shifted, that people saw you differently and you started to get more quote-unquote mainstream offers for mainstream movies?
Yes.
Okay. How did you manage those, I guess, that interest?
I was very appreciative. I was excited. It was a great time. Agents were thrilled. I was a feminist, iconic superhero in an action movie. So I, as an actor, went and did 2 things. I did a comedy about the abortion issue, and I stood proudly next to Ellen DeGeneres as she came out on national television.
Yes.
And I mean, I feel so proud and privileged for those opportunities and choices, but as the girl from Jurassic Park, that was not the most, the best Hollywood choice for certain people that wanted a different trajectory for me. And after Ellen, myself and Oprah Winfrey, who was in it, I don't know if you know her. Anyway, she was acting in it as well. Really nice lady.
She did a cameo in the coming out episode.
Yeah, we became really good friends. And the 3 of us are really close. And we didn't work for a while after that experience, which was amazing that it was only that many years ago, and it was really, she created a revolution, God bless her, but
she's had a hard time. It hasn't been easy. I think people look at her now and
it was crazy.
And her stand-up special on Netflix is just incredible. If you haven't, she talks a lot about the depression and the risks that she took.
Yeah.
And so at least you were with her.
Yeah.
Not to the same degree, but you were taking an equal risk. And I don't think a lot of people would have ever thought, wow, how risky of Laura Dern to do this like an incredible piece of history, TV history. And yeah, 97 was a different time.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
It's very wild. But I do want to talk about Citizen Ruth when you talk about your abortion comedy. This movie is so crazy and so funny. Obviously, Jim Taylor, Alexander Payne wrote the script. Alexander directed. So who's seen Citizen Ruth? Okay, now you have assignment over this holiday.
Oh my God, you guys.
More people need to see this movie.
This is the greatest movie.
It's so great. I feel like it's
so great.
It's peak Laura Dern. That's how I'm going to qualify it. It's absolutely incredible.
I do. I love this movie. This character taught me more than any character I've played. I worship what it says about America.
It's still so
sends
relevant
up
today.
both sides of the abortion issue brilliantly.
And that's what Alexander's so good at that. Maybe it's his Nebraska roots, but he's so good at not painting
Oh, it was
broad
amazing.
strokes.
I mean, it's one of the great political comedies ever made for me. I mean, and that he did that in Election within a year and a half of each other, and they're just both brilliant. But please see this movie.
Please.
You will love it.
Perfect Thanksgiving entertainment.
Yeah. Super inappropriate. My daughter's like, Mom, what was the movie you did with Alexander? Because he and I are very close. And I said, oh, it's this great movie we did in Nebraska, and who do you play? I'm like, oh, I'm a pregnant pain huffer. She's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so funny.
Well, she can find it on IMDb as well.
Yeah.
So speaking of political comedies, even though this wasn't meant to be a comedy, but Recount on HBO, I feel like was a big milestone for you playing Katherine Harris. We love Recount, right? Hello. 2008 election, which seems so adorable now, which is, oh, the cute little hanging chads and all that stuff.
Know.
I dream
so
of hanging chads
then.
now. Like that was the most controversial thing that we'd
When
been
they'd
through.
steal the election from us while we were watching.
Right? We saw it a little bit more blatantly. I was curious, how much research did you do into who Katherine was? She's still very much alive at the time. She's still very much alive now. How much were you able to glean? Because I think it was easy to paint her as a kind of cartoonish figure.
Yes.
And you played her with such humanity. How did you dig into that, not having what I assume was immediate access to her as a friend?
Oh, no.
I'm assuming, okay.
No. Yeah, I don't think she was a fan of that. She was on Fox News talking all about how she felt about it. But everything. I mean, I'm trying to think of all the ways. My first way in is Danny Strong, an actor, a fellow actor.
Of course, he wrote the script.
Decided to start writing and wrote a brilliant screenplay and was an unbelievable researcher. So he gave us so much insight. Both sides of this issue. We're very open, I mean, including a meeting with James Baker about it. I mean, I learned a lot. Former aides to Secretary of State Katherine Harris were very open and shared with me, and the amazing Jay Roach, who's just brilliant. And whenever I was horrified, disgusted by trying to have empathy or humanity for egregious, bold-faced stealing of votes.
Yes.
He would come in and he's like, how can you feel that? She's my muse. I mean, you know, like, and he would just like try to find a way in for me. And I think the biggest thing is she had been sent up so much on Letterman, on SNL, Mad TV. They did so many impersonations of her.
Right.
How to just try to be in the truth of it. And what's crazy is I consider it one of my more subtle performances compared to the things I learned.
Right. So you actually showed restraint in hindsight.
1,000,000%. I mean, there are things I didn't do that I was told happened on a daily basis that would have seemed so
just too much to believe had you done it on screen. People wouldn't have believed it.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
It's still even then. And what was really great was like talking to the aides, and thank God Danny and Jay were open to improvisation. So like right before one scene we did where there's a meeting about how we're gonna win the election for George W. Bush, I was walking in, I was like, how are you gonna start this scene? And one of the aides was there, and I said, did you go to Starbucks for her? And they said, yeah, and I was like, she's such a control freak, like what was her order? And they told me her order, and so I started the scene with, what was it, triple venti, it was like a triple venti latte, alternative almond milk, no something else, and then it was like, and 3 packets of the yellow sugar or something. And it was like, just the way she went about everything was so amazing.
That's
that you, as an actor, you know, like anybody who's in this sort of like demanding way, telling you what their order has to be. It's such a delicious way into the prototype. which is really fun.
Wow. Well, whatever you did worked, and you're right, maybe had you gone further.
Well, unfortunately, whatever she did worked. But, which was, stealing votes from people who weren't living.
Oh, goodness. Again, it's adorable by comparison.
Yes,
2008
exactly.
was adorable. Yeah. So I wish, again, we had an entire day to talk about Enlightened, but if you haven't seen it, please do.
Yay.
One of the great, there was a show on Bravo years ago, Brilliant But Canceled, which was about shows that didn't last as long as they should have, and I feel like Enlightened is at the top of that list. I know it's a huge passion project for you and Mike, and I can't imagine how angry Amy Jellicoe would be now. This was before the world started to fall apart, so maybe we'll see her again. Fingers crossed.
We might. You never know.
Might. So I do want to go to Wild, which into 2014, which I feel like, not that you've ever stopped working, but kick-started the Dern-assance in this most incredible way. Matthew McConaughey had the McConaissance, and I feel like we need to call it what it is. This is a Dern-assance. And I did want to talk about, you played Katherine Harris, who's a real person. In Wild, you played Cheryl's mother, or version of Cheryl's mother. Cheryl Strayed's obviously wrote the memoir. What were the perils that you saw becoming so close to Cheryl? Were you able to remove yourself from your friendship with her and look at this as a job when you were performing this character? Or did you just say, you know what, I can't separate myself from Cheryl. I want to be as entwined with her as I can telling the story.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
Okay.
No need to separate, a longing to be closer, a longing to understand the love story of she and her mother. And Reese Witherspoon, who played Cheryl, and I then continued that, and the three of us are all best of friends
because
of the experience, and love each other deeply. And I think it changed Reese and I's lives forever, knowing Cheryl, knowing her heart, her brilliant writing. If you guys haven't read Wild, or her amazing gift of this book, Tiny Beautiful Things, which is one of the great reads of all time. She is really an extraordinary humanitarian poet and empath, and her mother loved life beyond its complication, and she loved her mother beyond her complications. So it taught me a great deal about loving my mother, about being a mother, being a listener, and really changed my life deeply.
I can tell. It's a beautiful movie. And that's offers a great segue to your next project with Jean-Marc Vallée, which is Big Little Lies.
Jean-Marc
Vallée. Love saying that name.
His name, isn't it?
So talented, and obviously Big Little Lies.
He's a genius.
He is a genius.
Guys.
He is, and we should also mention season 2 of Big Little Lies. Andrea Arnold stepped in to direct. Did such a beautiful job. And I talked with Reese and Nicole a few weeks ago for an event.
Oh, that's right.
Which was wonderful. You were missed.
They tell me. I know, I missed you guys.
I can't imagine what you were doing. You haven't been that busy lately. And the two of them came up in film, obviously, as did you. And I was saddened to hear them say that this project was the first time that they had spent so much time with women on screen. And they both said that it was the first time they felt comfortable asking co-stars for emotional feedback, support. What did you think of what I just did? And to me, that just, obviously if you've acted opposite a man, you can still ask that person, but did you feel that was a time for you where you finally felt safe and say...
1,000,000%.
Really? It took that long? Wow.
1,000,000%. I mean, I think if you have, male or female, it doesn't matter, a great, incredibly deep person who is your scene partner, your fellow actor, it's like the greatest gift. And we've had them in an acting class, we've had them in a play or on a film. You're just so lucky when you do. And I have that with a few actors, male actors I've worked with, Mark Ruffalo at the top of the list, of being just like the most generous person to work with possible. And like holding your hand through every moment. So off camera, he's working even harder than on camera to be there for you. And it's so beautiful. But this was the first time that beyond doing that for each other, all of us, all the time, it was the first experience of literally any time we'd get a piece of the writing, one episode or a few scenes or rewrite of a scene, there wouldn't just be one text, but emails, texts, phone calls, coming to each other's dressing rooms, whatever it was, to say, hey, I read your scene, that they have nothing to do with. I read your scene. It's weird that like Renata would say that when she just left blah, 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 and showing up there. It feels like it doesn't, like it's such a team effort that every single one of us wants the other story. Yeah.
So you're looking at it from that perspective
Oh
too.
yeah, right. but all of us, everybody together, and really regular dinners, talking through each other's storylines, wondering how they should connect or how one sentence finishes another.
And was David E. Kelley open to, which sounds like a lot of feedback from a lot of people? I mean, this is a guy who came up through network TV, used to doing his own thing. I mean, with this like knock, knock, knock. Hi, David. We have some notes.
I think if he wasn't prepared to be, I think he ultimately learned to be. In that we're smart about how we do it, and I think we used each other as sounding boards so that when 6 of us were all feeling the same thing, we got very clear about notes and things, and I think he will say now, and I'm sure did then, I mean, he was always very generous with me with that, but I think he felt lucky ultimately that we were like, this doesn't feel honest, or this doesn't land, or you know, a woman being wounded might not feel that way about it, or whatever it is, you know. But all I know is, whether I felt confident or not, if I called him up and said, let me tell you something, Meryl Streep just texted me and said, this scene doesn't work, so we gotta change it, because I'm doing whatever she tells me to do. So I felt very lucky that that when Meryl joined, it was very easy to feel righteous.
And Reese and Nicole had such amazing stories about Meryl and just her, you know, they said, you know, if anyone could ever swoop onto a set and act like a diva and, you know, do her thing, and there she was, like, having little teas and, you know, just doing her thing and being such an actor first, just coming to set to do a job in hair and makeup with her funny teeth and her little wig and creating this, you know, this character for me could have been a little weird. The Mary Louise, is it her name?
Mary Louise, yeah.
And it seemed like she brought this extra, not only empathy to it, but this greater understanding of Perry, and and just the sad backstory. I think, I mean, obviously we knew Meryl would kill it, but I really love what she did with that character.
Me too, and
so beautiful.
And again, her generosity, you know, toward every single person, cast and crew, was really a deep lesson, right? Like, if you're given this piece, again, back to the 150 collaborators that come together, that it's our job to all of us do it and look out for each other at all moments, you know, and to pay respect to what everybody's job is. And she is the epitome of that. She is. And great reminder, incredible. And my parents as well, you know, like, I watched people who get ready in the morning, grab an apple box, and sit on the set until they're called. Like, they're not waiting for somebody to call them so they can swoop in and do their thing. It's like, it's a group effort, which is why, selfishly, I will say, why they have the greatest Hollywood stories, because they were there listening all the time.
Right, see?
So
they were in their trailer, they wouldn't have heard all the dirt.
Exactly. So it's way more delicious.
So before we get to Marriage Story and Little Women, and then we'll hopefully have time for a few audience questions, I do want to mention The Tale, which I know is a passion project for you. How many of you have seen The Tale? Okay, a lot of homework this weekend, guys.
Nice.
Beautiful movie.
Leave here, you every movie.
Laura Dern said so. But truly, this is
You know what? I'll cook Thanksgiving dinner. Tell your family sorry.
How much would we want that? That would be so fun. So for those who don't know, briefly just tell us what this movie is. And I know you produced it. It was a huge labor of love. And then I would love for you to just talk about how your producing work has made you a better actor, because I know this is becoming more part and parcel to most of the projects you're undertaking.
I mean, you know, amazingly, this documentarian named Jennifer Fox wrote and wanted to direct her first narrative feature about her own sexual assault in her childhood, and wanted me to play her. So that's radical already, and radical because it flashes forward and backwards in time as she, now in her mid-40s, sort of rewrites the narrative of what actually happened to her.
And tries to really remember what happened.
And tries to remember and discovers it, and discovered it at 45 years old. And it was incredible to be part of it. She had great champions because she hadn't made a film before, and Oren Moverman, who's a beautiful filmmaker, and Brian De Palma, both knew and had mentored her and loved her as a documentarian. So both of them reached out to me as producers on the film and said, this is an important story to tell, needless to say, and one I cared about deeply. Amazingly, perhaps, the timing was the film came out in the month that the New York Times broke this Weinstein story, and this rise of #MeToo, which had been around for quite a while, but was
fever pitch
given,
at that point.
given, yes, exactly, a fever pitch. That the stories have always been the stories, and we all know them well. But there was perhaps room to give voice to one's experience because others were speaking about their own. And so it was an amazing experience to have HBO show the film and then travel with it. And Jennifer took it around the world, and it was shown, everywhere, literally. And the outreach was amazing. And then for me personally, predominantly men in my life who had never shared their own experience of sexual assault in childhood.
What I think the film does such a beautiful job of showing is, and also unbelievable on Netflix if you haven't seen similar, not only the
which is amazing.
So amazing.
So brilliantly written by
so brilliant,
Susanna
but just
Grant.
the neurological impact of these events and how memory becomes this subjective thing, and how we just don't know enough about how the body and the mind store trauma. And I think that's what's so fascinating about this story. And again, more research and information needs to be made available about, if something happens to you, do you recollect it 40 years later? And what is that journey, and how much stock do we put in those stories, and how much stock do we put in people who say it didn't happen?
Well, and the world changed because the narrative of the bully is you're the only one experiencing this because you are less than. And now we know that that's a lie, and we've weakened the bully, which is a gorgeous thing culturally, because we know if we're experiencing it's happened to a number of other people. Specifically, I would say in universities and at Screen Actors Guild. And it's my focus when we launched Time's Up. My focus was working with SAG to create a new code of conduct, because and we can keep working on this because I was lucky in that far more treacherous things and devastating things could have happened to me. But I was 12, sitting in the lobby of the chateau to read for a part in a movie, and the casting director sent me up the elevator to the director in a room where there was a bed, and we sat side by side on the bed to read the romantic scene together, and there was no casting director, and luckily, in theory, he was respectful, but how many times I was in rooms where that's insane. You have a 12-year-old auditioning and you're reading with you. What? On a bed? What's happening? Where's the casting director? So, amongst the code of conduct and doing training sessions for new members, which all of you can be part of and teach the new generation. They have them every year here. We need you guys, actors saying to other actors, guess what isn't normal? Guess what isn't okay? Guess what you don't have to say yes to? And it protects the filmmaker or the casting person as well. No one should be alone in a room. Anybody can create their own version of what happened. So, but there's a lot of other ways we can support each other as actors.
And just keep talking about it. Make sure it isn't just a hashtag from 2 years ago, that it's actually omnipresent.
Exactly.
This isn't something that we've handled and moving
a
on from.
recreated story of like, oh, everybody's getting so sensitive.
Right. No, this is just
Okay,
basic
well,
workplace safety.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like we need the sign that's sort of like 0 days since last, you call
Yeah.
a construction
Yeah,
site.
exactly.
We need like a billboard for Hollywood that shows, how long it's been since the last infraction. So
Yes.
maybe we can get started on that.
I like that. Beautiful.
I can't do that myself, but you guys can figure it out.
We'll take it.
Yes. So before we move to audience questions, of which we have too many, but I'll pare them down. Marriage Story and Little Women. You have been talking about these movies for months. Such beautiful performances, so different from each other. Marmee and Nora. Who has seen these movies? Anyone? Okay, so you've seen. Okay, good.
Oh,
Yes. Advanced screenings and such. They're interesting. They're both supporting roles. But these movies do not work without these parts. That Marmee is the anchor of her family. In a lot of ways, Nora is the anchor for Scarlett's character going through this, another form of trauma. How do you think these two roles reflect what you are most interested in doing now on screen at this point in your career?
Well, back to the beginning of our conversation about filmmakers, like these are two filmmakers I have loved, have become friends with. We've talked about doing something together. I really worship them as writers and directors. And
they're real life partners, which
they're
is
real life
interesting.
partners.
Did they fight over who knows you better? And who's
Not yet, but it's coming.
It's coming.
But they and we all, as this family, really got to work together last year,
Right.
like through the year together, which was amazing. So following them where they wanted to go and with the stories they wanted to tell was really my wish. But I think, as Greta says it, which I love, she was like, so in Noah's movie you play the kind of mother or the kind of woman who tears families apart, and then in my movie you're the mother or woman who keeps families together.
I love that. So smart.
And it's pretty apropos of these stories and these characters. But to have, yes, in 1 year, these two outrageously diverse characters is an actor's dream. And you all know, we all know this like fear of being seen as one thing or typecast, but I was raised by Bruce, who very early on was stigmatized by killing John Wayne in a movie and didn't work but for playing the bad guy in Westerns for a long time. So that was like one of my earliest advice conversation memories was don't you ever let them pigeonhole you, don't ever play the same part twice. I think he really worried about that for me because he saw the limitation in that for an actor. The idea of, oh, they're very dramatic or, oh, they're funny, but can they really, all that stuff is all so absurd.
It's just so funny now to think, but nothing against John Wayne, may he rest in peace, but your dad could act circles around John Wayne.
Well, my favorite story, side stories, I won't take time away from this, was on the day that he was going to do the scene. John Wayne knocked on my dad's trailer. I won't do John Wayne, but my dad does it and is a great storyteller.
I'm sure.
And he said, well, Bruce, are you ready? And he was like, ready for what? And he said, ready, everyone in America is going to hate you. And
he was right.
And
he
it
probably
was
knew.
The late 60s, 1970, and a big moment. And he was a very beloved icon, Republican and everything.
Yes.
And he goes, well, you might be right, but you know what? In Berkeley, I'll be a fucking hero. Which John Wayne really loved. I thought that was so great.
Any Berkeley reference, I'm sure, sent him into
exactly.
a spiral. And before we go to audience questions, I would love to know, what are your parents, what kind of feedback do they give you now about your work? Are they forthcoming with their pride? How do they communicate how they feel about everything you've accomplished? Because I know sometimes parents, they don't always articulate the way, you might articulate to your kids, but what
oh my God,
like
they're
now?
beautiful.
They are? Oh,
yeah.
Good.
It's amazing to be raised by people who share the same love you share. Like, that's an amazing gift. I know what a struggle it's been and was for them to have family not get it or be cruel even about a career as an actor. So I think because of that, they're also so appreciative and so loving about about it, and I think they love that I love studying, and I keep studying, and I've had the same acting teacher since I was 18, and keep studying with her.
Who's your teacher?
Sandra Seacat. But I started at the actor studio as well, like my parents. But children's class at Lee Strasberg Institute on Santa Monica Boulevard. But,
hey, that still counts.
And studied with Peggy Fury, and I mean, so many amazing teachers.
Wow.
I'm so lucky. But there's so much to learn, you know. There's so much to.
You're like an athlete.
To dive
You're like
into.
an acting athlete. Just
all of us.
Undying energy, constantly still working your muscles, staying in shape.
But I think if I don't know, if I had shame around it, or my parents weren't so excited about what they get to do for a living, the privilege of like, we have a job that we love.
Such an amazing
I mean, my God,
model.
when you see how broken America is and all these people who wish they could even have a job. And that we actually, when we get a job, right? Because I was raised by actors.
Right.
I remember, I mean, just to say this as a reminder of my childhood, I remember, and this was a great gift of being raised by an actor and remembering gratitude. About 3 weeks after my mom was nominated for an Academy Award, we were in Santa Monica, and my mom kept saying to me, because I was 7, we were standing in this long line, and I was like, oh, this line is so long, why do we have to? She goes, don't worry, when we get to the end of the line, then I can take you to the ice skating rink across the street. And I just thought that was fantastic, so I was in for, and when we got to the end of the line, the woman looked at my mother, and she said, weren't you just nominated for an Academy Award? And my mom said, yes, I was, proudly. She was like, girl, and you're in the unemployment line?
Wow.
And I realized, and only later, then I was like, oh, she was getting her check, which she could then cash to take me ice skating, but she'd just been nominated for an Oscar. So I understand the privilege of getting to do what we love and the hardship of being an artist, and it's a long ride, and we just, like my dad said, being nominated for an Oscar at 80 years old for Nebraska, he's like, you just keep going. Because we love what we do.
It's amazing. Well, do we have a few more minutes to do questions? Okay.
Please.
I didn't want to keep you, I know you have a tight time table. This is from Charlotte. Where's Charlotte? Is it Charlotte or Carlota? I'm sorry, I'm not reading this handwriting.
Charlotte.
Okay,
hey,
Charlotte. You have beautiful, swoopy handwriting. Charlotte would like to know if you can possibly choose, I'm sure it's very difficult, your favorite character that you've played and why.
I think I sort of said it earlier that I think it's Ruth Stoops in a way, because she was the character in Citizen Ruth that I had to find. It's a comedy, and I had to find how to make something funny that was horrific or devastating every single scene. Right. And I think it informed, enlightened Big Little Lies, like everything I've done where out of the brokenness comes this humor. So that was a huge turning point, and I just loved playing her.
Citizen Ruth, guys, you heard it.
Thanksgiving.
This is from
Abortion
it's going to rain, so you may as well stay in all day watching all of Laura's movies. Okay, this is from Rachel. Where's Rachel? There might be more than one Rachel. Hello. This is a great question. Rachel asks, you are so physical and comfortable in your body when you're acting. Is that part of your process, a decision you make based on the character, or a decision, a behavior that exists, that occurs in the moment? So maybe the approach to physicality, how that informs each character. And I agree with you, there's such a confidence with you on screen, however you may be feeling inside, but it comes across as very, maybe it's your height. We're not used to seeing as just beautiful, tall women, take up space on the screen.
Well, Greta Gerwig and I found each other because of this very thing, which is we both saw each other in movies and said, oh, that reminds me so much of myself.
She's tall too.
Because we're very long and gangly, and doing press with Greta, myself, and Saoirse Ronan is literally like triplets, and we're all talking all the time with our hands and our long arms.
It's a demonstrative
so I think
group,
it's my wingspan that forces a sense of physicality to my characters.
I love that though.
But I, particularly in comedy, I love finding what that is, which I think it starts with understanding this sort of emotional nature of the character, but and I think again back to Citizen Ruth was a big thing because I remember Alexander Payne and it was his first feature, but it was such a great piece of direction. On the first day I'm walking down an alley and he said, remember, she's a mangy mutt. And that was
great
so
direction.
Perfect. And then suddenly my walk, the way I hold my head, you'll see, I'm a mutt with mange. I think I am. It was just perfect.
Did you ever have a director ask you to sort of tone down your physicality, sort of like, make it smaller, Laura, not so, such broad...
Boyfriends, not directors. Never a director.
Oh gosh, again, wish we had more time. That's such a great anecdote. And I'll probably just have to close with this one because I know we have to wrap. But this is a very specific question about Jurassic Park from Rhett. Where's Rhett? Oh, hi, Rhett. You lucked out. You won the question lottery.
My name is Rhett. It is.
He actually has a Jurassic Park brochure with him.
It's actually from the movie. It's from Profit.
Wow. Okay,
oh my God. Oh, you love this movie.
Yes, it's my all-time favorites.
That is amazing. Well then, do we have a movie coming for you? Oh my God, you guys, it is the brochure of Jurassic Park.
My husband bought it for me for
That's
my birthday.
What a good husband. That is very sweet.
Oh my God, I love that.
Well, I'm very glad we called on you because you've earned it with all the trouble you put into getting that brochure.
Yeah.
Or your husband's trouble. What was the hardest day of work for you on the set of Jurassic Park? As you made this Lynchian art house movie with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind. One, there was one tough day where the T-Rex kept breaking and I was hanging from half of a dinosaur from the ceiling, like literally hanging upside down. And finally, after like hour 9, I remember asking if I could talk to Steven. I was like, with tears, and he tells the story. He's like, you were like, I'm not feeling that this is so much fun anymore.
What did he say?
The technical and the learning curve of doing this so differently took a lot of patience, and I like acting. And,
What did Steven say when you told him that?
he was like, it's going to be great when we cut it together.
Buck up, camper.
And it does look great. I'm like falling from the middle of the but also, and I was a little scared of heights, and I'm like hanging there for hours. So that was the negative, and I would say the best moment, which summed up, again, the rawness of this movie that we'll never see on screen, was, I think it was the first or second day of shooting, and it's a shot of myself, Richard Attenborough, the amazing Sir Richard Attenborough, Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum are lined up, and we've just arrived at Jurassic Park, and we're looking over the cage, and the
He's
sort
like
of
about to pass out here.
chewed up harness starts to come up, and right before it does, he's talking about how amazing Jurassic Park's going to be, and this is so incredible, and suddenly, like, we hear this distant roar. And we're supposed to, be excited, and it's all amazing. We've seen the dinosaurs, and it's all going to be incredible. And then we hear this roar, and we're rehearsing it. And right before we go, Sam Neill says, Steven, we need to all respond at the same time. So we need some kind of cue. It would be great to have the terrifying roar of a T-Rex far in the distance. And it's, that famous, iconic Steven push-in. Right. That I know from Jaws so deeply, where the camera's just like that. And you feel us go, oh, wait a minute, hold on. What's happening? What does that sound? So he said, my God, of course, he brings his team over and they're organizing it because this is going to be a huge movie, right? Cameras roll and we're lined up and we're waiting for the sound and action. And Steven's holding a megaphone. He's got his tribe and the guy from ILM and Stan Winston. And we're there and we have our few lines. And then the moment comes, and we're waiting, and suddenly Steven goes, roar! Roar! And we all started howling with laughter, and Richard Attenborough was like, my dear boy, we might need a little bit more than that. And I remember thinking, oh God, I hope this works. This is like, is that what people are gonna hear when the movie comes out? So it was amazing. That's a good memory.
That's the most like consummate Hollywood story about making a movie I've ever heard. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a treat.
Thank you
all. Thank you.
Thank you. She's so amazing.
Thank you.
So lucky. Thank
Have a
you
great
guys.
holiday.
Bless you. Lots of love. Thank you.